My name's Mark Harris. I'm 30 years old, born and raised in a small town in Ohio. I've never been much of a traveler. Most of my life is right here. I work as a mechanic at Miller's Auto Service, fixing everything from beat-up pickups to brand-new SUVs. I rent a small house on the edge of town, close enough to walk to the shop if my truck ever breaks down, though I hope it never does. Life's been steady, predictable, and honestly, I've liked it that way. The best part of my life has been Emily. She's 28, teaches third grade at the elementary school, and somehow decided I was worth her time. We've been together for almost 4 years, engaged for one. Our wedding was supposed to be in the fall. Nothing fancy, just family, friends, and a little live band at the community center. That was the plan. That morning was like any other. I woke up early, made myself some coffee, and texted Emily to see if she wanted to grab dinner after work. She sent back a quick, sure. Miss you. The day moved slowly in the shop. Oil changes, brake jobs, the usual. Around 6 in the evening, I was wiping my hands of the shop rag, thinking about clocking out when my phone buzzed. The number wasn't saved in my contacts. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in me said to pick it up. Hello. A woman's voice, shaky and rushed. Is this Mark Harris? Are you connected to Emily Rose? Yes. She's my fiancée. What? There was a pause, the kind that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. Sir, there's been an accident. You need to come to City General Hospital immediately. I felt my chest tighten. What kind of accident? She's in critical condition. Please drive safely. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember the sound of the rag hitting the floor and me grabbing my keys. I yelled something to my boss. Maybe emergency. I'm not even sure. My hands were already trembling as I turned the ignition of my old Ford pickup. The drive to the hospital is only 15 minutes, but that night it felt like it took forever and no time at all. My thoughts were a mess. Images of her laughing at our kitchen table, the way she leaned against the doorframe when she was tired, the little silver ring she always wore, they all kept flashing in my mind. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles hurt. When I pulled into the hospital parking lot, I didn't even lock the truck. I just ran. The automatic doors opened and the smell of antiseptic hit me like a wall. I scanned the lobby, spotted the nurse's desk, and rushed over. I'm looking for Emily Rose. She was brought in from an accident. The nurse looked up, her expression softening. Sir, please follow me. We moved quickly through the corridors, the sound of my boots echoing against the tile. I turned a corner and froze. Down the hall, a group of medics was pushing a gurney toward double doors marked intensive care. Emily was on it. Her head was wrapped in white bandages, tubes ran from her mouth and nose, and her face was pale, so pale I barely recognized her. Emily. I tried to move toward her, but the nurse put a hand on my chest. Sir, you can't go in right now. She's being stabilized. The gurney disappeared behind the swinging doors, and I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the spot where I'd last seen her. A man in scrubs, the doctor, I guessed, came out a few minutes later. He looked at me with the kind of face you never want to see from a doctor. She's in a coma. Severe head trauma, multiple fractures. We're doing everything we can, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility she might not wake up. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The hallway around me seemed too bright, too loud. My ears were ringing. Somewhere inside, a voice was screaming, no. This isn't how it ends, . The first night, I didn't go home. I couldn't. I parked my old Ford under the dim light at the far end of the lot and left the driver's window cracked because the cab still smelled like motor oil and coffee. I tilted the seat back, folded my jacket into a pillow, and stared at the hospital's lit windows until my eyes burned. Every time an ambulance wailed in, I sat up straight, heart pounding like I was supposed to do something, help someone fix something. But there was nothing to fix that night. Not by me. In the morning, I washed my face in the restroom by the lobby, combed my hair with my fingers, and bought the cheapest coffee from the vending machine. I texted Emily's mom to say I was here, that I'd stay, that I'd call with any change. Then I walked to the florist down the block and picked up daisies, simple, bright, the kind she liked. I knew she wouldn't see them. I brought them anyway. They let me into her room for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is a lifetime when you're terrified, and nothing at all when you can't say what you need to say. Emily looked smaller than I remembered, like the bed was swallowing her. The ventilator sighed, and the monitor ticked out a rhythm that felt like it should comfort me, but didn't. I set the daisies in a plastic pitcher, pulled a chair close, and took her hand. It was warm, but limp like sleep without rest. I said, my voice catching on the second word. I brought you flowers. They don't smell like much, which is probably good for a place like this. I told her I was here, that I'd keep coming, that I'd talk until she got sick of me. Then the nurse touched my shoulder, and I had to leave. Days blurred. I learned the names of the night shift staff, and which nurse would sneak me an extra minute inside the room. I learned the pattern of the hall lights and the weak spot in the vending machine where candy bars sometimes got stuck. I started reading to Emily. The paperback she left on our coffee table, dog-eared at chapter 12. I propped it on the bed railing and did the voices badly. Don't judge me, I whispered to her. You're stuck with my narration. I talked about ordinary things to fill the silence. How Mr. Miller covered my hours without a lecture. How a kid came into the shop asking if a muffler was the same thing as a bumper, and I laughed and then felt mean for laughing. How our dog, Max, kept pacing between the kitchen and the front door when I stopped by the house for clean clothes, circling back to the mat and whining at nothing. He'd press his nose to Emily's shoes and then look at me like I was hoarding answers. I took him for a long walk, told him she was fighting, promised him she'd toss the tennis ball again. He wagged like he believed me, and I decided I would too. The hospital became its own small world. The constant antiseptic smell, the beeping monitors, the squeak of cartwheels around 3 a.m. when the floors were buffed. I started sleeping in the truck every other night and on a molded plastic chair by the ICU doors on the others, using my hoodie as a blanket. A volunteer left a basket of granola bars on the counter. I folded a thank you note into it with Emily's name on the back, like proof of purpose. On the 10th day, a neurologist with tired eyes pulled me aside. He showed me a grayscale image on a tablet and explained swelling and diffuse injury and pathways that weren't lighting the way they should. He talked carefully, like holding a fragile box. There's minimal responsiveness. We have not observed purposeful movement. I want to be honest with you, Mark. We may be looking at a prolonged state. His words were clinical and kind at the same time. I nodded because nodding was the only thing I could do without breaking. I called Emily's parents. They drove in, her mother gripping a tissue the whole time. We sat together in a quiet family room with a coffee pot that hadn't been cleaned in months. When the doctor finished, her dad stared at the floor. Her mom reached for my hand. "We love you," she said. "You've done so much. We don't want you to lose yourself." I knew what she meant without her saying it. The conversation ended with, "Let's give it more time," which felt like a truce with something we couldn't see. The days stretched. I started keeping a notebook, the time the nurse adjusted a setting, the temperature of the room, the songs the radio played in the cafeteria, any flicker in Emily's fingers, any shift in her breathing. Most entries were boring, and that was the point. Boring meant she was still here. One afternoon, a social worker met with us. She spoke softly about choices and quality of life, about paperwork that could be prepared in case. My chest went cold. After she left, Emily's aunt, who'd always been practical to a fault, put a hand on my arm. "Honey," she said, "your devotion is beautiful. But at some point we have to think about what Emily would want." I swallowed hard and shook my head. "Emily wants to finish her book by the lake," I said. "She wants to argue about the right amount of lemon in chicken piccata. She wants to teach kids how to multiply by 9 using that finger trick. She wants to dance at our wedding and pretend she hates the small talk. That's what she wants." I went back to the room and took her hand again. "They're trying to help," I told her. "And maybe they're not wrong to plan, but I'm not letting go of you because a chart says I should. You hear me? I'm stubborn. You knew that when you said yes." On the 20th day, I brought pictures from home, us in front of the rusted barn on Route 6, her in a ridiculous Christmas sweater, Max wearing a bandana. I taped them to the wall where the 4-pole didn't block the view. "Look, Em," I said, "this is proof you have to come back. I'm in 2 of these without a decent haircut. You promised you'd never let me do that again." Some nights were bad. I'd sit in the truck with the engine off and listen to the tick as the metal cooled, knuckles pressed to my eyes like I could squeeze the panic out. I'd picture the life we'd built, the lease with both our names, the the box of mismatched mugs we argued about throwing away, the guest list spreadsheet open on my laptop. I'd think about how fragile everything is, how a left turn at the wrong moment can split a future into before and after. But morning always came, and with it, the routine that kept me upright. Coffee, wash up, flowers, sometimes daisies, sometimes carnations when the florist was out, 5 minutes by our bed, and then more minutes begged out of kindness. I kept talking. I read another chapter. I told her about a girl in her class who dropped off a card with crayon hearts, addressed to Miss Emily. Please wake up. I put it next to the pictures and promised to thank the kid when this was over. On the 28th day, the neurologist met us again. Same careful voice, same grayscale images. We still have no purposeful response, he said. I'm sorry. We should consider a family meeting to discuss next steps. After he left, Emily's mother cried into my shoulder. Her father rubbed his temples. The aunt stared at the wall. Someone said, we can't let her suffer. And someone else said, she isn't suffering. And I just stood there like a piece of furniture that wouldn't budge. That night, alone by her bed, I leaned in close. They want me to think about letting you go. I whispered. I can't do that. Not yet. If you want me to, if you're tired and you need me to be brave and stop, you have to tell me in a way I can understand. Until then, I'm staying. I'm reading the next chapter tomorrow. Spoiler. The main character makes a dumb decision and then fixes it, which is very on brand for me. The monitor kept it steady in different rhythm. The ventilator breathed for her. I kissed the back of her hand and sat until the nurse dimmed the lights. When she asked if I needed anything, I said, yeah, more time. The 29th day started like the rest. I woke stiff in the truck, wiped the condensation off the windshield with my sleeve, and walked into the hospital with a paper cup of bad coffee. I was halfway down the hall toward Emily's room when I noticed her parents standing outside the ICU doors, talking quietly to the neurologist. They all looked at me at the same time, and I knew before anyone spoke that something had shifted. Mark, the doctor said, stepping closer. Can we talk in private? We went into the family room. That same cramped space with mismatched chairs and the old coffee pot that never got cleaned. Emily's parents sat across from me, her aunt beside them. The doctor remained standing, holding a thin folder. We've monitored Emily closely, he began, and after 4 weeks, we still see no purposeful neurological activity. No eye tracking, no voluntary movement. I'm concerned we've reached a point where the chances of meaningful recovery are extremely low. I stare at the floor. My hands were clasped so tight they hurt. He continued, I know this is difficult, but I recommend we have a serious discussion about withdrawing life support. The words hit like a cold wave. My chest tightened. So that's it? We give up because a month has passed. My voice came out sharper than I intended. No one's giving up, he said softly. We're considering Emily's quality of life and what she would have wanted. I understand you care deeply, but we have to be realistic. Emily's mom wiped at her eyes. Mark, maybe it's time to let her go. I shook my head immediately. She's not gone. The doctor exhaled slowly. We'll respect your decision, but I need you to understand the medical reality. If you'd like, we can give you time alone with her. It might be a moment to say goodbye. The phrase lodged in my throat like a splinter. I nodded stiffly, not trusting myself to speak. A nurse led me to Emily's room. The lights were dim. The ventilator hummed softly. I pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. Her hand was smaller in mine than I remembered, her skin warm but fragile. I took a deep breath. Hey, Em, they think I should say goodbye. My voice cracked. You know me. I'm not good at goodbyes. I still keep that sweatshirt you hate because it smells like the shop. I still rewatch movies we've seen a dozen times. And I can't picture life without you in it. My thumb brushed over her knuckles. Remember last summer at the lake? You dropped your phone in the water and swore it was ruined, and then it still worked. You said maybe you want to keep going. I don't know if you can hear me now, but I think you're like that phone. Everyone thinks you're done, but you're not. Not yet. The room was quiet except for the mechanical breath and the steady beep of the monitor. I swallowed hard. I was supposed to marry you in the fall. We were going to dance to that awful old song you picked just to embarrass me. We were going to argue about where to hang your grandmother's painting. I stopped because the next word stuck. I leaned forward until my forehead touched the back of her hand. I don't know how to say goodbye to you. I don't want to. But if you're tired, if you need a rest, I'll understand. My throat tightened until it hurt. I love you. Always. The nurse came in quietly and asked if I needed more time. I shook my head, not because I was ready, but because I didn't want anyone to see me break apart completely. I stood, kissed her forehead, and whispered, I'll be back in the morning. Just hold on if you can. Out in the hallway, I leaned against the wall and pressed the heels of my hands to my eyes until the burning eased. Her father walked past, gave me a pat on the shoulder. No words, maybe because none would fit. That night, I didn't go to the truck. I walked around the block 3 times, ended up sitting on the curb outside the hospital's emergency entrance, watching people rush in and out. I thought about all the times Emily had pulled me back from the edge, when the shop was slow and I was sure I'd have to move back in with my parents, when my dad got sick and I didn't know how to be there for him. She always found a way to make me believe things would get better. Now it was my turn to believe for both of us. I stayed outside until my phone buzzed with a text from a nurse I'd gotten to know. She's stable for the night. 3 words, but enough to get me to stand up, brush the grit from my jeans, and walk back in. I sat in the chair by her bed until the ICU lights dimmed for the night. I told her a story about Max, trying to jump onto the couch and missing, and about how the coffee shop by the park had changed their menu again. I didn't know if she could hear me. I talked anyway. Eventually, I let my head rest against the mattress, still holding her hand. I closed my eyes and told myself I'd just rest for a minute. The last thing I remember before sleep took me was the steady rhythm of her heart on the monitor, proof that she was still here, and that, for now, goodbye would have to wait. I woke up in the ICU chair with a crick in my neck and my hand still wrapped around Emily's. The early light from the hallway spilled into the room through the half-open blinds, catching on the edge of her bandages. For a second, I thought about yesterday, about the doctor's words, about how close everyone was to signing the papers, and the weight in my chest came back full force. The nurse on morning rounds stepped in quietly. How's she doing? I asked, my voice rough from sleep. Stable, she said, checking the monitor. No change. She smiled gently. You should go grab some breakfast. I nodded but didn't move. Breakfast felt irrelevant. Instead, I leaned forward, brushing a loose strand of hair from Emily's face. Morning, Em, I whispered. I promised I'd be here, and I meant it. They're still talking about letting you go. I told them no. I told them you're still in here. I started talking about anything I could think of. The weather outside, warm for March. The neighbor's kid learning to ride a bike. How Max had figured out how to open the pantry door and got into the treats. Just filling the air because silence in that room felt like giving up. And then it happened. It was so small at first I almost missed it, a faint tightening in her fingers against my palm. I froze. Emily. My voice was barely a whisper. I looked at her hand, then her face. Her eyelids fluttered once, twice, like they were too heavy to lift. I leaned in closer. Em, it's me. Mark. Slowly, painfully, her eyes opened a sliver. They were unfocused at first, her gaze shifting, but then, unmistakably, they found mine. Jesus, I exhale, my heart hammering. Okay, you're here. I got you. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I squeezed her hand gently. Don't try to talk. Just stay with me. I reached over and slammed the call button for the nurse. She's awake, I said, louder now, my voice shaking. The room exploded into motion. 2 nurses and a doctor rushed in. One checked her pupils. Another adjusted the bed so she was slightly upright. The doctor asked her to blink if she could hear him, and she did. Twice. He glanced at me. This is good. Very good. I stepped back just enough to let them work, but I never let go of her hand. I kept talking to her, even over the noise. You scared the hell out of me, you know that? For weeks, Em. For weeks you had me talking to myself like an idiot. She blinked again, slower this time, and a hint of a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It was small, fragile, but it was real. The doctor ordered some tests immediately. A CT scan, blood work, neuro checks. While they prepped her, he explained quickly. Sometimes comas end abruptly. Sometimes it's gradual. We'll know more in the next few hours. But this is a good sign, Mark. When they wheeled her toward the scan room, I followed, staying close enough to see her face. She looked exhausted, her eyes drifting shut between movements, but every time I spoke, her brow twitched like she was trying to respond. After the tests, they brought her back to the ICU. Machines still surrounded her, but now there was something new, a flicker of life that hadn't been there yesterday. I sat down, took her hand again, and felt another faint squeeze. I leaned in, my voice low so only she could hear. "You came back. I knew you would." A nurse walked in to adjust the four. "Don't expect too much too soon," she warned kindly. "She's had a long way to go. But this is a miracle." When we were alone again, I told her everything she'd missed. The snowstorm that only lasted an hour, the way her mom redecorated the living room, how I nearly burned down the kitchen trying to make her lasagna recipe. Her eyes stayed half closed, but I could see her listening in the subtle change in her breathing. Hours later, her parents arrived. Her mother gasped, tears spilling instantly. "Oh my God, she's looking at us." Her father stood frozen in the doorway, hands over his mouth. "She's not just looking," I said. "She's squeezing my hand." Emily's mom came to the bedside, brushing her hair back gently. "Hi, baby. We're here." Emily's eyes moved toward her, slow but deliberate. The doctor returned in the afternoon with cautious optimism. "She's showing signs of awareness. This doesn't mean she's out of the woods, but the fact she's responding is huge. The next days are critical." That night, I refused to leave her side. Every time her fingers tightened in mine, I answered, "I'm right here." Every time her eyes met mine, I smiled and said, "You're doing great." The fear was still there, fear of setbacks, of complications, but now it had something to fight against. Before the ICU lights dimmed, I leaned closer. "You've still got that wedding dress hanging in the closet, you know. We got plans, so you better keep waking up." And for the first time in a month, I walked out of the ICU to grab a coffee feeling like tomorrow might actually be better than today. The next morning, I came in early, coffee in hand, not sure what I'd find. Part of me feared yesterday had been some kind of fleeting spark, like a match flaring in the dark and then going out. But when I stepped into her room, she was awake, not fully alert, but her eyes were open, and she looked toward the door as I entered. "Morning," I said, pulling the chair close. Her gaze tracked me, slow but deliberate. That alone made my chest feel lighter. The nurse explained she'd been more responsive overnight. Small movements, slight head turns when spoken to. Still unable to speak, but there was progress. "We'll start light physical therapy soon," she said. "The earlier, the better." I leaned in so she could see me clearly. "Hear that, Em? We're getting you out of this bed." Her lips moved like she was trying to answer, but no sound came. I told her it was okay. "We'll get there, step by step." That first week was about relearning the basics. Simple exercises, squeezing my hand, moving her toes on command. She tired quickly, her eyelids drooping after a few minutes. But every small victory felt monumental. One afternoon, a physical therapist came in, a tall, energetic woman named Dana who spoke with a mix of firmness and encouragement. "Okay, Emily, we're going to try sitting you up today." It took 3 people to do it safely. They adjusted the bed, supported her shoulders, and swung her legs over the side. She wobbled, eyes wide, like her body had forgotten gravity. I stood in front of her, hands ready. "I've got you," I said. She gave the smallest nod. She lasted less than a minute before slumping, but it was enough to make Dana grin. "That's how it starts," she told me. "Tomorrow will be better." Speech therapy came next. The therapist used flashcards, pictures of everyday objects. "What's this?" she asked, holding up a photo of an apple. Emily stared, lips parting, a faint sound in her throat, but no word. Frustration showed in her eyes. I took her hand. "It's okay. We got time." Her first real word came on day 9 of rehab: water. It was hoarse, barely audible, but it made every muscle in my body feel lighter. I laughed, blinking fast. "You got it. Water coming right up." Meals were a challenge. Swallowing was harder than I'd imagined. At first, everything was pureed. I joked about the hospital's gourmet pudding, and she rolled her eyes, her first eye roll since waking up, which I took as a good sign. Outside therapy sessions, I read to her. Finished the book we'd started before the accident, then started another. I brought in her favorite lotion because the hospital air made her skin dry. I brushed her hair. I told her the same stories I told while she was in the coma, about Max, about the weather, about the world moving on, but waiting for her at the same time. Weeks turned into a rhythm. Therapy in the morning, rest, visits from friends and family, more therapy. Emily's strength grew slowly. She went from sitting with help to standing between parallel bars, gripping them so tightly her knuckles whitened. She'd take a shaky step, and I'd be right there, my hand on her back. Her personality started peeking through again. One day, when Dana encouraged her to try another lap in the therapy room, Emily looked at me and whispered, "Slave driver." I laughed so hard the therapist gave us both a look. There were setbacks, too. Days when she was too tired to complete exercises, moments when her frustration boiled over and she refused to keep going. Once, she broke down in tears, saying, "I hate this. I hate being like this." I sat on the edge of the bed and told her I knew it was hard, harder than anything either of us had faced, but that I wasn't going anywhere. After 6 weeks, she was moved out of ICU into a regular rehab unit. That first night, without the constant beeping and flashing monitors, felt strange, almost too quiet. I slept in a recliner by her bed anyway. Eventually, she took her first steps with a walker. It was only across the room, but it felt like a marathon. She grinned afterward, and I thought, asterisk, there you are. There's the woman I know, asterisk. We celebrated small milestones, her first shower without a nurse, her first time feeding herself again, the first time she managed a short conversation without pausing to rest. Her voice was still raspy, but her words carried the same warmth as before. One afternoon, as we sat by the window watching rain streak down the glass, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for not giving up." I didn't trust my voice enough to answer right away, so I just squeezed her hand. By the end of her 3rd month in rehab, she was walking short distances without the walker, just holding my arm for balance. Discharge papers were in sight. The doctor warned us the journey wasn't over. There would be outpatient therapy, fatigue, and maybe permanent changes. But Emily was ready. On the day she left the hospital, she paused at the exit, leaning on me. "Feels weird," she said. "What does being outside after so long? Like I've been underwater and just came up for air." I looked at her, the sunlight catching her hair, and thought about all the nights I'd sat in that ICU chair wondering if this moment would ever come. "Then breathe, Em," I said. "We've got a lot of air left to take in." It had been a year since the accident. A year since that night, when I got the call that split my life into before and after. Emily and I had rebuilt everything from the ground up, not just her ability to walk or talk, but our daily life, our plans, even the way we looked at time. She still went to therapy twice a week. Some days her left leg dragged a little when she was tired, and her voice didn't have the same strength it once did. But she was here. We were here. That morning, I asked her to take a drive with me. It was late spring, the air warm enough to roll the windows down. We drove out toward the edge of town, past the diner we used to go to after Sunday morning errands, past the old red barn she loved to photograph in the fall. She didn't ask where we were going. Maybe she already knew. When I turned down the gravel road leading to Lake Haven, she smiled. "This is where we had our first date." I glanced at her. "And where you told me you hated fishing, but came anyway, just to impress me." She laughed, shaking her head. "It worked, didn't it?" We parked in the same spot we had that day, overlooking the water. The sun reflected off the surface, turning it into a sheet of silver. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. I got out and walked around to her side, offering my hand. She took it and stepped carefully onto the grass. We made our way down to the little wooden dock, the boards creaking under our feet. "This is where I thought I'd ask you last year," I said quietly, "before everything happened." She looked at me for a long moment, then down at the water. "We've been through a lot since then." "Yeah," I said, my throat tightening. "But you're still the person I want to wake up next to, argue about dinner with, build a life with, no matter what that life looks like now." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the small velvet box. Her eyes widened, and I could see the tears before they fell. Emily rose. I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. I asked you once before, but this time I know what it means to promise forever. Will you marry me? She pressed her hand over her mouth, then let out a shaky laugh. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Mark. I slid the ring onto her finger, the same one we'd chosen over a year ago, before everything went sideways. She looked down at it, then back at me. You kept it all this time? Never thought about returning it, I said. It was always yours. We stood there for a while, just holding each other, listening to the gentle lap of the water against the dock. There was no rush now. We'd already learned the hard way that you can't take a single day for granted. A month later, we had the wedding we'd originally planned. Same community center, same little live band, same string of lights I'd bought on clearance. The only difference was the way people looked at us, like they understood something they hadn't before. Emily walked down the aisle on her own, slow but steady, her arm looped through her father's. When she reached me, she grinned like she had a secret. I realized in that moment that we'd both survived more than the accident. We'd survived fear, grief, doubt, and 100 small tests no one ever sees. We exchanged vows, simple and honest. No promises of perfection, just the certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. After the ceremony, people clapped and cheered as we danced our first dance to the same awful old song she'd picked just to embarrass me. And yeah, I still hated it, but I danced anyway because she was in my arms, and that was all that mattered. Later, when the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, we sat on the steps outside the hall, the night air cool against our skin. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You know, she said softly, they told you to say goodbye. I kissed the top of her head. Yeah, I'm glad I didn't listen. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In my mind, I went back to that hospital chair, to the beeping monitors and the weeks of not knowing. I thought about the moment her fingers moved in mine and how it had felt like the world shifted back into place. This was our ending, not the one anyone expected, but the one we fought for. And as I looked at her, laughing quietly at something she saw in the sky, I knew it wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning we'd earned, one stubborn day at a time.